How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this next edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today, we're going to be talking with Nicole Van Beurden. She is a professional athlete in the past with Triathlon. She's the founder of two companies, ELLEVO and SÖR, and many other things, running a small business in carbon fiber repairs and painting, and also a coach. She's done a lot. She has a lot of experience, and this is actually a 2-hour-long podcast where she dives into her background, but then we talk a lot about the techie stuff about behind carbon fiber and where the industry is, where it's going, about her partnership with Phil, who is the I believe he's the co-founder of SÖR, and so many other things. So without further ado, please enjoy this podcast with Nicole Van Beurden. Hey, and just one more note really quick. So for this episode, we had some kind of a recording issue that I thought, or audio recording issue that I thought we'd be able to get figured out. Unfortunately, we were not able to do it to the best of how we would like it to sound. However, we're still going to publish it because it's a really good conversation, and especially if you're a technology-driven person or a mechanical type of person and like the techie stuff, this is a really good episode, so we didn't want to cut it out. So please forgive us for that, but thank you. Yeah, so Nicole, where are you from? Where are you at?
I'm in Toronto right now, and I'm originally from Toronto, so I was born and raised in Toronto. And then I've been all sort of about Ontario and various other places. So while I was racing, I spent half of my year sort of down south in the States between Florida, mostly in Florida and Claremont, and then Arizona. And then in the non-winter months in Canada, I was back here in Toronto. And then I moved after university to Niagara. I lived there while I was racing, and then went from there to Barrie for a bunch of years until COVID hit. And then now I'm back in Toronto.
Yeah. So were you born and raised in Toronto?
Yeah. Downtown Toronto, which is just awesome for when you're starting to get into cycling. Yeah. Worst place to ride. But.
For sure. Well, first of all, just want to back up a little bit and say thank you so much for coming on. It's really neat. I've been doing some research, just trying to figure out the best questions to ask, and you've got quite an interesting story, so I'm excited to jump into it. But the first question I want to ask you is more of a third-person one. In your own words, who is Nicole Van Beurden, if I said the last name right?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's fine. So you can say it just as well as I can, because it's a Dutch last name and I can't pronounce it correctly because I'm not fluent in Dutch and I don't have the accent. So That's great. Who am I? I would say I'm sort of a curious thinker. And that's kind of what's driven a lot of my my journey through, figuring things out in life and tinkering. Sure. And I'm a cyclist by nature. Like, that's one of the things that I always loved. Yeah. I picked up a bike the first time. It was my friend's bike. I think I was in kindergarten, and I wanted to ride a bike, and I wanted a bike, and there was, 3 of us kids at home at the time. So to buy three bikes, my parents were like, no, let's just wait and see. Yeah. But then I went to my friend's house, and when my parents came to pick me up, I was riding a 2-wheel bike, and they're like, how do you know how to ride a 2-wheel bike? And I guess we should probably get her one. So that kind of started it. And one other thing that I've always loved, I'm like, my parents never really, they were always like, you go to school, do your homework, you have to be on the honor roll, all this. And the one allowance they gave us, or my mom would do, is she would write a doctor's note for my younger brother and I. So we both raced. Okay. On the Friday, so the opening day of the bike show in Toronto, so that we could get out of school to be there for the opening.
Nice.
So I've always loved bikes, and I raced. And then I'm highly curious by nature, and I've always sort of just followed my curiosity, and it's led me in weird places.
Sweet. So you're a very curious person. So tell me a bit about your family life. Do you get more of that curiosity from like your mom or your dad, or is this like a totally Nicole thing?
Oh, it's definitely from my dad. My dad has always been somebody who solves problems in atypical ways, which is like, it's just more thinking outside of the box and having the understanding that there's not one solution to any given problem.
Sure.
So anytime you're faced with a problem, if the first try doesn't get you the solution that you want, then you just try another,
Yeah.
take a different tact, right? So,
Yeah.
and then he also does a lot of tinkering, so like hand stuff. So he does like RC stuff, like radio controlled planes and some boats. And he also builds a lot. Like he did a lot of construction and repair on a house when I was little. So, and that was something that I think was mostly self-taught at first. So it's, just I grew up with that. So it was pretty normal to me.
Yeah, for sure. And so what does your dad do like as a profession now? He
does custom. So he's gotten into construction. He started out in business and marketing. Okay. And then when I was, I think, in grade 3, he switched to construction. So it started out with home finishing, and then it was insurance repairs. So my parents, both of them together, started a business.
Okay.
And my mom does the design side. My dad does the like carrying out of the building. And so now he does like mostly kitchens, bathrooms, house redesign, repair, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So the reason I asked that question kind of twice, I guess, because asking what he did, I was curious if he did other things. And it sounds like you grew up in an entrepreneurial household. So how was that dynamic with like your mom and your dad? Because your dad seems kind of like the driven type to go out and try and do something new. Is your mom a supporter in that? Like, of course she's a supporter. I guess they're still married and you grew up that way. But how does she fit into that picture?
They're both pretty much the same, and they've always.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, they've. My mom had other things that were hands-on. My mom, when I grew up, because there were 3 of us born within 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a pretty.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot for her. So she had a custom cake business, which again is hands-on and more artistic sort of construction, such as wedding cakes and various other types of occasional cakes. And I always helped her with it. So there was also building and design and all of that. And I would do all the painting and on the cakes for her, sort of while I was young and in elementary school. I took visual arts as well, all the way up until university.
Yeah.
And then, so I had an artistic background, and a lot of things that I did, and both my parents were hands-on, and they ran their own businesses, so to speak.
Yeah. So I want to get back to siblings. You said 4 siblings, or you were included in the 4.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So are they similar to you? Are you all ultra high-performing inventor entrepreneurial types?
Oh, heck no. We're all different.
Yeah.
So I'll think about families. Yeah. My older brother is a computer programmer.
Okay.
And he's one of those kids who got 99 and 100% in, all of the high school, like algebra and calculus and finite and chemistry and biology and all of those. So I like to make the joke that because he was first born as second, and it's like he took all of his brain cells plus some of mine.
Nice.
So, and he does mountain biking and rock climbing. So that's what he did. And now he's a father of 3, and he's computer programmer, has been since high school. My next younger brother, Chris, he's the one that I raced with. So he did triathlon, duathlon at a very high level. Mm-hmm. And right now he is a high school teacher in Guelph, Ontario.
Okay. And
he does a lot of sort of side jobs of construction and woodworking. And then my youngest brother, Tom, is in the Air Force.
Okay, nice.
So we're all kind of very different.
Yeah, it seems like high performing though, nonetheless. I mean, so your brother who did triathlon and stuff with you and at a high level, did he actually race professionally as well?
Yes, yeah. He did. Yeah, so he was on the national team for many years. Duathlon. So he would have been more of the Olympic distance athlete, but his swim was never as good as the top level swimmers, and because it was a draft legal format, it's really tough. So he went into duathlon, did really well there. Okay. And kind of went between there, did some half iron distance ones. Yeah. But I think that wasn't his preference.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what kind of memories from your childhood do you have that are just like really stand out? And do any of them serve as like a guide or a base or something you go back to frequently as you move forward in life?
So I guess one that always is, when there's a standout, it's not really a memory, but it's kind of an ongoing memory. And this one I've cited to many people before. Whatever we did as kids. So my dad, one way that he tried to get us to just try things. Like my parents were really good at not caring about what it was that we followed. Like as long as we followed something that drove us and that we had a passion towards, they would absolutely support us in doing that. My dad had this ongoing bet. No, it wasn't a bet. It was when we did events, so track and field, cross country, anything that was a race, like if we entered a 10K or a half marathon or anything like that, he would give us, we didn't get allowance or anything. So this is a precursor because it seems very cheap right now, but $1 for crossing the start line. Okay. Which means that you showed up to the thing that you intended to do. So you crossed the start line, which means that you did all the pre-required training to get you there. $1 for crossing the finish line, which meant that you finished what you started. And then $1 if you got a personal best, which meant that it's the only way, and this is one thing I think that helped set my mindset, is the only person I ever compared myself to was my own past performances. So I was never deterred by coming in not the best placing if it was against like a really strong field. Because I would look at the positives and see there's something that I did better in this race than I ever had before, then that's a win, right? So a perfect score is you start, you finish, and you do better than you ever have done before. That means that you are increasing your ability, your skill, and you're getting towards, seeing what you're capable of.
Yeah, for sure. For you and all your siblings, were you all encouraged to do the cross country, like that kind of stuff, or were you all just interested in it? Because it sounds like you touched on many sports.
I used to play all sports, and like kind of any sport that was there, I would have done. And I think that was just because I needed something to do. Like I needed to move. I don't sit still well. So all the way from elementary school onwards, I did a whole bunch of sports. In high school, I think I did like 7 different sports.
Yeah, I actually read. Oh, go for it.
Yeah. And then university, first year, I think I did, it almost killed me. I did varsity basketball and track and field and like cross country. And I was also training and racing triathlon at the same time. So that was, in second year, I had to sort of make a decision. So I dropped basketball after first year and I stuck with the endurance sports. But yeah, it was kind of any sports. And I was driven, but not all of us were.
Yeah, for sure. So basketball is very different than swim, biking, and running, but you obviously loved it to a great degree. So I'm curious, do you ever think about now, like, oh, what if I went the basketball route? Could I have played for the WNBA? Or do you ever think about that kind of thing? Or are you like, no, triathlon's all it?
No, it's a different sport altogether. And there's a lot more involved. So including like positions and how teams are selected and how teams work together, because being on the court has to do with the other 4 people on the court with you, plus the other people on the bench that make up your team. So that's a really hard thing to come across when you have a team that works really well together and plays as a team and highly unselfishly and does all the, so it can be a frustrating sport depending on the team you play on or the people you play with or the coaching staff. I love the game. I still play at least once a week.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of the one thing I do, and I show up with, I'm always bruised everywhere. Or they asked me to, what did you do to yourself? I was like, I played basketball yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, to get bruised, you must play pretty seriously. Is this like a local league that you're a part of, or is it just a group of friends? Like,
Yeah, it's a league. I play in a couple of leagues, and they're fairly high level leagues. But the one time I touch a ball ever is just when I'm on the court right now because
Yeah.
I work too many hours right now. But it's good. So when I'm on the court, I just work as hard as I can.
Yeah.
You often end up somewhere on the floor.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't want to get ahead too much, but I'm curious, like, you don't race triathlons professionally anymore, correct?
Correct. Yes. That was part of balancing sort of life, work, racing. Like it was such a hard balance.
Yeah.
Because the amount of training required to race at the highest level competitively while still making a living. And it was also like a hard time in my life. And I was giving up sleep. So I was getting 2 hours of sleep at night, trying to do both, which obviously doesn't yield to your greatest performance.
No, not at all. Yeah.
And so I was always coaching at the same time. So that's one thing that's continued all the way through.
Yeah.
And then I got back into racing for a little bit, and then I tore all 3 hamstrings in one of my legs.
Ouch.
I had one injury that kind of like sidelined me for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And there was no racing. And then right after that, I had recovered and COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then there was no racing for several years.
Yeah.
So there's positives that come with everything. So that's when I did a lot more on the cycling industry side of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Worked a lot more.
So we're going to get into that. I have lots of questions around that stuff, but a couple of things. First, a stupid question I probably shouldn't ask. How old are you?
I had to think about that. I'm 42.
You're 42. Okay. And then when did you quit racing professionally in, I would assume, like mid-30s, early 30s?
Yeah. So I think it was, let's say 2013, 2012, something like that.
Okay.
So maybe 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big step. So you mentioned something just kind of in passing that if it's okay, I'd like to dig into a little bit. You said like you were going through a hard time. What was hard about that time?
Oh, I was previously married. So when I was racing, we were both athletes. So we were both racing pro. And so that marriage split up, and that was where I had to sort out everything. So it was financially hard, but then also between the moving and the sorting out life, everything else, it put a very sudden stop to what was. So like anything sort of I had planned in the next 6 months in my head was no longer. Yeah.
Kind of blew up.
Yeah. That's life, right?
That is life. Yeah, life definitely can throw you curveballs for sure. But it sounds like you made it through. So like, is there something that kind of helped motivate you through getting through that hard stuff? And I'm not saying like, oh, you just completely overcome it, everything's perfect now, but is there something that kind of like underlying helped motivate you to get through?
Not so much a motivation as more of a freedom to do what was best for me.
Sure.
So, and I mean, that's when I started into all of the developments, which is now SOAR. That started then, which I never would have happened if I still been married.
Yeah.
So there's always a silver lining to everything.
Sure.
And it was obviously something that was in me that kind of needed to come out. And so, there's no negatives to anything in life. I feel like life happens for you, not to you. So you see the positive in everything. Yeah,
sure. It's all about how you chew it.
Decide to work
with it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to go back a little bit. You're in high school, then you're going to college, like you said, you're doing all those different things. When did you start to realize that, oh, maybe I can do this triathlon thing as a profession racing-wise?
So when I started into racing, I was already running for U of T at the time.
Okay.
And I had done some triathlons the previous year. I had bought my first used road bike, with the down tube shifters. I think I paid $300 for it, something like that.
Yeah.
It was, 7 or 8 speed race bike.
Nice.
And I did okay enough that I kind of cut the bug for it and I really liked it. And that's what the summer so that was the summer right before university. So I'd already planned to go to university to play basketball. And my last year of high school, I had a really frustrating year with my basketball team. So there was a lack of discipline in the team. There was conflicts within the team and between athletes, which was really tough. And I was the captain, and it was really tough for me. And because I had to try and deal with all of the athletes and try and manage all of, sort of like, let's play together as a team. It doesn't always work. It all depends.
Yeah.
So I had a frustrating last year. We had a lot of talent, and it didn't come together. And at the end of that year, or that season, which would have gone into the start of the summer, I kind of just made the decision that I want to do something this summer where it's for me. If I work hard and I do well, then that's awesome. And if I work hard and I don't do well, then that's fine too. But I put it all out there, and you kind of see where the chips land. So at the end of the summer, I think I kind of did better than I expected. It was on that used bike that I had mentioned.
Yeah.
And going into university, so my brother and I both raced together. We did all the races, and we wanted to buy an actual bike.
Yeah.
So that fall, we did our bike shopping. We bought a bike. I borrowed money from my older brother to do it, because he's been working as a computer programmer since he was in high school.
Yeah. So
he was my bank account for all my bike purchases when I was starting out. And I obviously repaid him, but
yeah.
So we bought a bike. Actually, I think we bought it from our parents, and they trusted that we'd pay them back on that one.
Nice.
So bought a bike, started training, because I really liked that summer, and I liked that I was kind of starting to get better at it, and kind of things were starting to fall in place, and I was figuring it out. And I had never been really good at the endurance side of things, because all I had done was spend time in the gym and playing basketball.
Yeah.
So now that I train specifically for endurance sports, I was starting to see the benefits of that. So I got our first bike. I really started loving it. And that following summer, the bike shop that Chris and I, so Chris is my younger brother that I raced with, we got a bike from a bike shop, and they said, come out and train with us. I got dropped within 10 minutes of warm up every single time for weeks and weeks. Didn't matter.
Yeah.
And they're like, so they said to Chris had more talent than I did at first. And so Dennis, who was the shop owner, he told my dad, he goes, they have to go to junior nationals. And I was like, yeah, like that's ever going to happen. But it did. And shockingly, I did pretty well. So I had no swim background. Like, I didn't even know what a swim stroke was. I was pretty horrific to start out.
Yeah.
And I just got a wetsuit. So I started my first few years in triathlon without a wetsuit. Had to kind of learn how to swim, but I didn't know at that time. So I did the swim. I was so far behind coming out of the water.
Yeah.
But the race they thought everybody was cleared out and was on the bike. Oh, and I come out, and I remember I got on my bike, and I get to the mount dismount line, and the volunteer at the mount dismount line, she looks at me and she goes, "You've got a lot of catching up to do." And I said, "You aren't kidding." And but it wasn't a bad thing. I wasn't discouraged by that. It's like failure is how you get better.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just rode as hard as I could, and I think it was a 3-loop course. And it was a loop where on the end of every loop, you did a small out and back into the transition area. So you had this maybe half a kilometer stretch where you could possibly see anybody. And I think the first 2 loops, I saw nobody and assumed I was still 10 minutes behind.
Yeah.
And then I think before starting out my last lap, I'm going into that out and back, and I see them all coming out, and I was like, oh my God, I'm actually catching them.
Yeah.
So that was super motivating for me, and I knew that the run was absolutely my strength because I was running varsity. And so by the end of the bike, I had caught the sort of main group of, well, the main race.
Yeah.
And then I ran my way through a lot of them, which I had no idea. Like, I'd never done a draft legal race in my life, and I had never really done that caliber of racing.
Yeah.
And I got a spot for Worlds that summer and ended up going to Worlds. But I think, so to answer your question, you said what was kind of the thing that made me switch is, so one of my best friends, who still is, from elementary school, or sorry, not elementary school, from in university, he was also racing. So he's in the junior men's race. And so I qualified for Worlds. I got the envelope that did this, and I was like, there's no way I can go. And he just looks at me and he says, when's the last time you qualified for Worlds in basketball?
Yeah.
And then I was like, good point.
Yeah.
So I think that was pretty much a perspective changer of, yes, I can continue with basketball because I love it and it really drives me, and I love that it's a thinking game, and to me it's like a chess match. Like, you do what the defense offers you, and it is that like instant thinking kind of sport, and it's fast thinking, and I love it. But again, there's so many considerations, like team, coach, teammates, and like how your team does. So like even qualifying for higher levels has to do with teams. So I'm like, it was great that I could compete at a higher level and kind of follow that trajectory and see where it led me. And it was great because I got to travel around the world and see a lot of things, which was mostly airports and homestays or hotels and race courses. But there's a lot of places that I want to go back to because I've seen them and they're incredible.
Yeah, for sure. How did so I know for me, for like the first time I got to go overseas, I was 9 and I went to India, and then just been fortunate enough to be able to go to a lot of different countries growing up. And for me, from a very young age, like it really started to shift my thinking and like how you view culture, how you view other people, just realizing that the world is a much bigger place. How did that affect you as you were like maturing into, you're going into college and then you're trying to figure out what you're going to do long term, whether it's triathlon or, the entrepreneurship stuff? How did that shape you?
I think, again, I will go back and that's an easy answer for me. My dad has lived in, I don't even know how many countries in his life. So he was born, he's Dutch. So my grandparents and his whole side of the family is Dutch. They live all throughout the Netherlands. And he was born in Thailand, and he lived in Thailand, Bangkok, until he was, I want to say 6, something like that. So he went but he learned, obviously, Dutch. Then they moved to Holland. So he lived there until he was 10 or 11, came to Toronto when he was, I think, 11, and didn't know a word of English. So I know all the stories, and I know sort of his experience of what it was like to be in a completely different culture or move. So he's lived in the States. He's lived in all over Holland, all like Thailand, like he just, 3 schools per year sometimes in different countries. And that to me was something where you have to be adaptive.
Yeah.
And also when I was, my background is when I was in grade 5, there was a family that moved to Canada from Japan. And his 2 sisters. One was in grade 4, one was in grade 5, and I was in a grade 4-5 split class. And they came on the first day of school. They didn't speak a word of English. Actually, the only word of English they knew was the word no.
That's a good one to know.
If somebody did something that they didn't like, they would say no. And I don't even know how. It's when you're that young, language doesn't really matter. And they were my best friends that entire year, like almost right from the first day. And I still keep in contact with them, and my parents keep in contact with their parents. And it's kind of like a different view on, so I never had that. I never was moved from one country to another or where I didn't speak the language.
Yeah.
But when I traveled, a lot of times it was where I did not speak the language, or you're in a smaller town where nobody speaks a word of English. And it makes it much easier for me to be okay with it because I know that I'm visiting.
Yeah.
And it's, it gives me perspective, and it also helps me understand sort of the experiences that I've known from my dad and from my friends back in elementary school, and appreciate that more.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Those are such valuable things, and it's really neat to hear that it carries over a generation because you mentioned that, you had a kind of a stable upbringing, and I think that's really important for children, just from like a family rearing perspective, kids need that. But the fact that you were able to kind of glean quite a bit from your dad's experiences and have that affect just, I guess, your worldview or the way that you view things is really interesting. I've never heard that before, so I think that's really cool.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So I'm curious though, before I kind of go on, your dad, you said he moved around a lot and he lived in Thailand or was born in Thailand. Did you?
Yeah, he's born in Thailand. Yeah.
Was he like part of a military family or?
No, my grandfather was, he was president of Philips Electronics at the time. So I guess at that time in that era, that was when I guess they were sort of developing the like lighting and things like that in different countries. So he was the one that kind of went with family
Yeah.
to the different countries to sort of start it up there.
Yeah. Philips Electronics, that is a massive company. What is when did Philips start? Is that like World War II?
You know what? This is something that I should know, and I do not. It's funny. I have photos, or I don't have photos. They're at my parents' place. But like with my opa, my grandfather, with like the king of Thailand, and like so he's like very well traveled and did a lot. But I think a lot was lost, and it was a different time. Like things were different then, and I think Philips was sort of more just starting off, but it was also a company that really helped sort of not instigate, but like develop a lot or drive a lot of change in electronics in all the countries.
Yeah, that's wild. So it makes sense that, I mean, maybe there was some influence on your brother for why he did software engineering and stuff like that, because like there's definitely overlap in that world. But by the way, I just Googled it. Philips Electronics was founded in 1891 in Eindhoven, Netherlands.
Yeah, there you go. So Eindhoven, yeah. So that's, I think Eindhoven is, I think that's one of the places that my dad, I'm like, is it very familiar? I'm like, I'm sure that's one of the places he's lived.
Yeah. That's super cool. Man, well, you need to write a book. You need to interview your father and grandfather and anyone else who's still alive around that area. Because, I mean, you're talking World War I, World War II, moving, the Cold War and everything else, because a lot of those companies are often a better historical, I don't know, reference than the history books we have in school because, just what's going on. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So going back to college, you're doing the triathlon thing, and then you I guess at that time start pursuing your degree in kinesiology. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I did that, and then so first year was basketball and cross country, and then I trained with the track team, but they wouldn't let me do both.
Okay.
And then after that, I did cross country and track and field. So all the way through. So that was your 4-year program.
Okay. And then you moved on. You're racing professionally, I would assume, for a few years. I don't know how old, or at least more than a few, probably 10 years? Is that about right?
Yeah, at least 10 years.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what was during that professional career, everything else aside, just racing triathlon, what is in your heart, the greatest achievement that you kind of got to? It doesn't have to be a win. It can be like a certain thing you overcame or whatever.
This is probably too many stories though, because some of them are just like certain instances. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they're in like really small races, but it was mindset driven, and some of them were like more performance things that I did or didn't think that would happen. Or just an experience of like, those races where you feel like, and what I would describe to, which I don't know if it'll make sense to a lot of people, but when you're really in really good race shape and you're having the race of your life, you're kind of racing and you're excited. And it doesn't matter how hard you push, you keep pushing harder. And the way I would describe it is like you can't hurt yourself. You keep pushing, you'll break down, but it doesn't matter because your body will just keep going.
Yeah.
And so you kind of go into autopilot. So race experiences where you kind of go into that flow state, those are pretty magical. And those are where you'll see like really awesome performances. And I've had a few of those. It wasn't always in all three disciplines.
Sure.
Oftentimes it was just on the bike, sometimes on the run or the bike and the run. And yeah, it really depends. But some of one that sticks out to me was a small race, and that was a mindset one. And I think it was like a Guelph Lake in Ontario. So a big race for Ontario, but sort of a small race for pro. Like there would have been a very tiny prize purse at the time.
Sure.
And that was a race where I think I got off the bike. So I was competing against, I knew the other woman that was racing pro there. And she was like a collegiate swimmer, and I was not. I was new to swimming. And I was pretty far out of the water. I caught up on the bike, but I think I started the run, and it was only maybe a 7.5K run.
Okay.
And I think I got the split that I was like 2.5 or 3 minutes down. And I was like, and I knew she ran cross country at her university.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's too much. So I just made a decision in my head, and I don't even know why. I just said, I'm going to lose by 10 seconds instead of 3 minutes. And it wasn't about whether I won or lost. It was, I wasn't going to lose by this much. I was still going to come in second, but I was going to lose by 10 seconds instead of 3 minutes. And then I actually ended up winning the race. But I think that's only because I sort of changed my mindset.
Yeah.
So things like that really help, and the body follows the mind always. So what you tell yourself is really important, your internal dialogue while you're racing, and keeping it positive is really important. And then there are other races that I had where I just really got into sort of a flow, and especially on the bike, because the bike is the longest, so in a half Ironman, let's say, you're on the bike for 2+ hours. So for 2+ hours to be in that state, like that's pretty awesome. And you pass other riders at, a pretty serious rate where you're going a lot faster than they are. And when you know that that's happening, that's also very motivating.
Fuel to the fire. Yeah.
Yeah. So every single one that you pick off, it just like, it like you said, it adds fuel to the fire, and it helps. So when you have those race days where that kind of happens, you go with it. And sometimes you go so hard on the bike that you blow up sometime on the run. And that's okay too, because you have to put it all out there to see what you're made of, or what you're capable of. Not what you're made of, but so you'll never know what you're capable of. That's sort of my opinion. You find out, and you only find out by actually pushing. So pushing, it might end disastrously, but you have to. It's like that whole analogy of having faith in yourself and in your training. It's like, there's a cliff, you have to jump off it. You can either like sort of half fall off it, or like take a running sprint into it and just go. And you have to have faith that you're going to sort it out on the way. And maybe it ends well, maybe it doesn't. But that's what racing is, and that's what always inspired me. It's like you try things, and even when you fail, so a fail would be what other people so externally view as failing of, your placing was this, right? Let's say it was not what I possibly think I should have placed, but if I went too hard or did something else and really put it on the line because I thought that it might have paid off, there was no failure that comes from that, because physiologically I know that once I rest and let my body sort of sort itself out and rebuild, I'm going to now build to a point way above baseline, the baseline fitness that I was at prior to the race.
Yeah.
So there's no bad that comes out of it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I was going to ask a question, I guess, because a lot of people talk about this whole mindset matters, and I've had races myself where I decided before I even started it was going to be a bad race, and what do you know? It was a horrible race, and I got sick, and everything starts hurting worse, and it's But then I've done other races where it is a really good mindset, but sometimes I can lead up into a race a week or more, and I'm like really thinking about it mentally, like, okay, like, why am I doing this? Because it's a joy, it's a gift, and you're doing that. But then when I get to the race, it's not always that easy to just keep that mindset. So is there anything that you did within triathlon, outside of triathlon, to like maintain that kind of a mindset? Like whenever you notice yourself start to slip and be less full of gratitude, or however it is that you view it, is there
Hmm.
something you do to get back to that place?
Yeah, I always go on based on past experiences. So I've had a lot of races where I think I was set up to fail from the start. So one example is I did Ironman Canada, and I can't remember what year, maybe like 2006, something like that. And I got there early because I wanted to train on the course. So I think 3 weeks early, and I had a homestay. But the homestay family was in like somewhere, building
There we go.
houses for a charity organization somewhere in the world,
Okay.
and it kind of just trusts to use their house and to stay there for the race week. And didn't have a car, and with 22K up the mountain, so
Wow.
biking up and down to pick up your race kit and jump, all of that stuff. So that was a bit of a pain. But back to the 3 weeks before. So we were there 3 weeks before the race, and suddenly, I think it was the Sunday before, so 1 week before the race, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I thought this is probably the most sick I've ever been in my entire life. I could not even make it to the bathroom without thinking I was going to pass out.
Oh my.
And I had such bad, I don't know, it was food poisoning. I had no idea, but I was very sick. Like I had to crawl back to bed after I had thrown up because
Oh my.
I didn't know how to do it without passing out. And that whole week, it kind of continued. And then at one point, I think it was like 3 days before the race, I was like, you know what? I'm sick, so I'm going to have a bath. So I went and I turned on the tap, put the plug in, filled the bath, went to get all my stuff ready. I come
Oh
back
no.
in 5 minutes later, I look at the bathtub, and it was like the color of beer.
Oh. Okay.
And I'm thinking, oh my God. So I did a quick Google search, which is not quick because that was back in like almost the dial-up
Yeah.
days. And apparently, I think it was Summerland, which is the sort of town up the hill. Summerland was on a boil water advisory
Oh.
because the water wasn't good, but nobody told us. So I had been occasionally filling my water bottles for all my long rides with that water,
Oh my goodness.
washing all the dishes, brushing my teeth, drinking them for weeks. So and while I was sick, I was still like
Doing it.
exposing myself to it. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no. But I had depleted my system so much by race day. I think I had my first solid meal the night before, or at best the Friday before, like the 36 hours before. And I got into the race, and I was still positive. I was like, this is gonna be great. So this is a long story to answer your question, by the way, but
No, it's good. Take your time.
so I'm doing the race, and I cramped up severely several times in the swim. So my hamstring and my calf, and which happens a lot in the swim.
Oh my.
But I was so depleted in electrolytes, and it was fine. Got through the swim, got onto the bike, and I didn't feel fantastic, but I pushed hard. I raced as I had planned, and I remember like maybe 70K in. I didn't feel super great, but I kind of told myself, like, I look back, so the answer to your question is I look back at past experiences, and a lot of my best training rides of all times, where I had absolutely no idea that was going to be how the ride ended up, they started out as horribly as possible, where I thought of quitting every second. So I kind of used that, and I was like, this is just like that day,
Yeah.
where I'm like, it took me 2.5 hours before I started feeling good. And then all of a sudden my body woke up, and I just kind of kept telling myself that'll happen. So anytime something goes badly, I'll immediately connect it to some time where things didn't start out so positively,
Yeah.
or looking like they were going to end well. And they did, and I'd be like, maybe this is one of those magical days.
Yeah.
And again, it's like the body follows the mind. And when you stay positive, or you connect it to a positive experience, things happen. So it wasn't the best race.
Yeah.
I still think I did okay considering.
Do you remember?
But yeah. Oh well, it was okay until about, I didn't even know how I was going to get past 90K on the bike. I had loss of quad function with, I think, 10K to go in the bike. My muscles wouldn't contract anymore.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember my experiences, and I think it was my first Ironman too.
Oh my.
And I didn't know what the change tent would be like. And I had visions in my mind. It's like, maybe when I get there, there's going to be like an all-you-can-eat buffet, like an aid station tent in there. I'm like, maybe I'm going to sit down on a chair, because I know there are chairs in there, I've been told, and I'm going to have some food. But little do you know, like, you get through the like mount dismount line.
Yeah.
So I dismount the bike. Somebody takes your bike. Somebody like pushes you through. Then they grab your bag for you. They give it to you. They run you. They start putting on your shoes for you. And I'm just like, no, I'm okay.
Let me chill for a second, please. I'm dying.
Is there any food here? So it's, but they were so good. And Ironman Canada was one of those races where I think the stat is like, for every one racer, you have 3 volunteers.
Wow.
So the volunteers are so absolutely incredible that I was in and out of the change tent before I even knew what happened. And I had intended to maybe take a break, maybe not start the run, maybe see how it goes. I mean, I know I would have finished. And then I got out onto the run, and the streets are lined with people for the first, I knew, 6.4 kilometers, something like that. And then it goes into this place where spectators aren't allowed, because it's a one-way street for emergency access that's along a lake. And it's cliffside on the other side of the road. So all I was trying to do was get to that point so I could possibly walk, because I didn't even know how to run. I was like half hobbling. My quads were seized. Everything was not working. And anyways, I think I had a 7-hour marathon.
Oh my.
I think I ended in like 13 hours. So it's like, and it was a drastic like fall off a cliff, and I was super happy to have found, like, this is again the magic of Ironman.
Yeah.
And to have it on my first experience was great. Is you find people who will stop and walk with you, and they will motivate you, and they'll be like, let's go. After this aid station, we're like speed walking, or we're going to jog for like 200 meters, and you just follow their lead. And they, like, the other competitors got me to the finish line. So that wasn't me. The marathon was pretty unideal, but it was still an experience for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good experience. Did you cry at the finish line?
No, I think I was happy to finish.
Yeah.
I think I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it wasn't at all what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And I mean, I knew why. At least there was reason. I was hoping for better, and I was hoping that my body had sort of regained its composure before the race starts, from being sick, but it hadn't. So it just makes for a long day when you do a race that long.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're sick.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But you got a lot of really good life lessons, that sounds like, that I'm sure have carried you through not only that career for triathlon, but also the business side, which I want to dive into. So I read that you ran or /run a business building custom bike equipment, mostly special parts for Paralympians. You do really good paint jobs for, I assume, bikes and other things. how did you get your start into like making these different products? Because what I'm observing is like your family, you guys like tinkering with your hands. You're high
Hmm.
energy, very curious. There's the engineering background. So how does all that kind of wrap into what you started doing with your hands and creating things that eventually led to the businesses that I really want to ask about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of that stuff, the carbon repair. So my introduction to that. So it's also a weird coincidence, and also this goes back to something I'll blame or thank my dad for.
Okay.
Is I've been working with composites just oddly, kind of, or been experiencing composites since I was born. My dad was a high level sailor, and that was one of the industries at the time where, like in the 70s, where composites, so carbon fiber, fiberglass, everything was carbon fiber and fiberglass. In the cycling
Okay.
world, nothing was, like absolutely nothing was. And so my dad knew a lot about, composites. So, and his application or his background in knowing how to use them came from his, just as I had mentioned before, is his RC, radio controlled hobby.
Okay.
So planes and boats and the like. So he builds and repairs planes for like RC enthusiasts. He flies several times a week. Kind of always has, it's a real passion of his. And he's always used fiberglass and or carbon fiber as reinforcement on his wings, and like when he's building his planes.
Yeah.
So any part that needed reinforcements, extra strengthening. So like where the wings meet the fuselage, he'd use, or the lead edge of the wings. So those would be reinforced with fiberglass. And when I got into racing, I was interested in things going to carbon fiber, and I don't think things have really gotten to carbon yet. I think that at the time there might have been introduction to some of the rear seat stays.
Yeah.
Like I think Columbus came out with some of the first seat stays that were all carbon fiber, like they were prefabricated. You just kind of insert them into the aluminum or steel lugs, so steel or aluminum frame.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, there's carbon, obviously, in cycling. It's lighter. It serves a purpose. There's more life to it. So titanium at the time was the more lively, and it was lighter, more durable. It had energy give back to it. So it had more snap and positive benefits just from the material alone than aluminum and steel. So carbon to me was like something a little bit higher. So I was racing and I wanted to start building parts on my own bike, just because that's kind of how I think.
Yep.
And I started doing that. And so the first place we went to, my dad drove me to, because I didn't have my driver's license at the time, because we lived in downtown Toronto. It's like expensive to even own a car, park it anywhere.
Yeah.
So we went to, at the time, there's a place called Smithcraft Fiberglass, and it's not in business anymore. But I went there because I knew that they sold carbon fiber. I looked it up. So I went there and I asked the guys, and it's like $80 a yard, something horrendous.
Yeah.
There's no way I can afford any of this.
Yeah.
So I was like, do you have any scraps or cutoffs or anything? And I don't know whether they just felt sorry for me or if they actually found the humor in it. But they have all the cutoffs of all of their stuff, and they kind of just scoop them up at the end of the day and put them into a garbage bag and throw it away.
Yeah.
So they gave me this whole garbage bag of scraps of carbon fiber. Like, and some of them were, fairly sizable, not sizable enough for somebody who would buy carbon by the yard.
Yeah.
Off of a bolt, but for my uses, like I started off making things like bottle cages and saddles. So I made my own saddles and small parts. And I think she gave me a whole bag of it for like $5.
Oh, wow.
And then I bought the resin from them and some mold material. And then I started like really delving into researching how to do sort of all the engineering that goes behind it. And that was like, I don't know, like 2000, 2001, like that was a long time ago. So I've been using, or working with composites for more than half my life now. And through it all. And I've been working in the also cycling industry for almost the same amount of time. So at a university, I worked for a bike shop that also had Racer Sportif, but also Aquila cycles. So I was the person doing so I saw all of the raw frames that came in. So the raw designs, we would then change the tooling, change various parts on it. So I got to know a lot about the design engineering that goes into bike frame development.
Yeah.
And so all of this stuff kind of helped, and I kept going with it. And I've been repairing frames. So bike frames, cracked bike frames. I've also done like other odd things, some skis. Some now you get like aesthetic panels on bikes not bikes, on cars, like that are carbon fiber now, and so repairing some of those. Not my preference. They're very large and it's more aesthetic than functional.
Sure.
So I've the whole front of my apartment here is full of wheels and frames that are waiting to be repaired, and there's never any shortage.
So you're still doing that?
As soon as I hang up this call, I have like 3 that I have to get on.
Yeah.
So it's I do instill a number of that every week. So I think I've cut open every brand and model of frame. Like I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of frames over the years. And I repair them. And then again, I mentioned that I had a background in visual arts. So that's where the sort of finishing and paint comes in not handy, because now it's the pain in my ass. Is because everything right now in cycling is going to premium paint jobs, color shift, and specific pearls, and like all of these pigments that can't be matched. So when you pay for a premium frame with a premium paint job and you crack it, and I get it in for repair, I'm like, the repair is the easy part. The hard part is now making it look like it was never damaged in the first place.
Yeah. So what do? Do you reach out to the manufacturer and you're like, hey, give me
No, so every manufacturer, and I don't blame them at all, they will not give any information. They will state it's proprietary paint color. They do not supply any samples, not even to dealers. And it's because they can't guarantee, and it's too much, and they can't shelf life any of this stuff. So paints don't last. So if they were to stock them, chances are they'd lose, like shelf life would run out before they would get them to a customer that needed it. Yeah. So all of it is hand mixed. So I hand mix all the paints. So anytime I get a color shift, that's all. You have to figure out the base coat. So they're usually like a 3-color process. So it's a base coat and a mid coat and then the top coat or the color shift, and then the degree of gloss, or like the candy coat's another hard one to match. But so I've been doing that for a while, a very long while. The paint now, because the way the industry is going, it's paint jobs are the sort of like flash that people pay for. Yeah, and everything's carbon now. And it doesn't take much with the high performance frames. Is lighter is better. So they're very well engineered, which is incredible for performance, which is what gets the weight down super low. Mm-hmm. But the downside is they only have reinforcement towards the stresses that a bike receives while it is being ridden. Yeah. So there are very, unfortunately, weak points in the middle of tubes, the middle of the top tube, the middle of the seat stay. Those are some of the weakest. Yeah. So all you need is, and all the stories I get are a rider that'll say, I just leaned it against a wall and a gust of wind hit it and it hit the corner of like a brick, or something, and it cracked. Yeah. Because it wasn't designed to, carbon fiber is 9 times stiffer than steel in the direction that you want it to be stiff, but in a perpendicular manner, if it's impacted perpendicularly, it is highly brittle and it'll crack. And once it cracks, if you continue to ride it, the crack spreads and it's kind of spiders. and then it becomes completely unrideable and unsafe. So you have to repair it or you have to replace it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a very specific technical question? So I worked in the textile industry for a little while, so I understand like the bolts and yardage and stuff. Like what I dealt with in a lot of nylons, carbon fiber. When it comes on a bolt and you get that, what is it about the resin that is there a reaction that happens that once you add the resin that it gives it the tightness and the stiffness? Like what's actually happening in that process?
So the resin is what the carbon is impregnated with. So what you want to do is infuse or saturate it. So carbon is like just like a fabric. So I mean, I could show you a piece. We're on video here during the call, but it is just fabric, and each strand is made up of, depending on if it's a 1K, a 3K, whatever it is. That's how many thousands of strands of carbon it is in that single bundle that is incorporated into the weave. So it's very soft and highly pliable, and it has no functional strength, especially when it comes to if that was a bike, right? It's like a fabric. It's really just like a sort of more stiff fabric. It only becomes strong once you impregnate it with a resin. So there's a whole bunch of different grades of resins. They're not all created equally. Some are made to withstand heat or friction forces better. So things like wheels that are designed for rim brake, those will use different resins that have a higher tolerance for heat or heat dissipation. So when you apply enough heat to carbon, the layers will actually split and separate. So you'll have catastrophic failure of the product if you blast enough heat at it. It'll fold, it'll buckle, it'll do things. So depending on the intended purpose of the product that you're making, whether it's wheels or whether it's frames, you use a different resin. And with resin, so you need the carbon, you need the resin, you need a pressure, and you need a heat. So those are sort of the four components that are absolutely required. If you only have three, it won't work. So it'll be, again, brittle, it'll snap. So if you need the weave, the correct layup, so layers upon layers, where each layer is sort of sort of changing direction of overlay, which gives it more strength to withstand the forces that are applied at that particular point. Like a bottom bracket in a bike has more twist forces than other parts of the bike. Same thing with a head tube and dropouts, like rear drops. So the chainstays are really important. The bottom bracket, the down tube, the head tube, that's pretty much what makes up the strength component of a bike frame. And the resin is important, so you have to fully saturate the carbon fiber. Then what you have to do is add pressure. So you have to weep out every bit of resin that is not completely contained within or set. Like a sponge, it will hold what it can hold, and anything else is excess. So if you have any excess resin that isn't sort of weeped out through pressure, what happens is you get pooling of resin within the matrix of the carbon, and that becomes a weak point.
Yeah.
So when you do any carbon repair or when you make frames or anything, is you need to have a super even pressure, or you have to know how to apply your pressure or how to do your layup. So, or even what weave to use. So you have different thicknesses, different weaves. So twill or a cross carbon, you have unidirectional weave as well.
Yeah.
And each repair job I do is different. I'll use a different carbon.
Yeah.
But then heat is the other thing. So when you heat resin, it liquefies. And when it liquefies, that's what's really important. When you combine that with the pressure, it weeps out every single bit of extra resin so that the carbon is the thing that is left. So the saturated carbon, and now the carbon can be as strong as it can be.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm curious now to hear I guess one quick question. You're still doing this repair business while the other ventures, you see that funny little thumbs up thing? I don't know why it does that. Anyway, The business you have going right now for the repair stuff, you're still doing that while also doing a company I'm about to ask about, or companies, Elevo and SÖR, is that how you say it?
Yeah, ELLEVO and SÖR,
Elevo,
yeah.
okay. Elevo and SÖR.
ELLEVO, yeah.
So how does that all tie in? Obviously, there's a lot of experience here that translates, and I know that's a long period of time that we're about to cover,
Mm-hmm.
but walk me through a little bit of these two companies. What are they? How did they start?
Yeah, okay. So the reason I'm still doing, so the first part of your question, the reason I'm still doing the repairs is COVID, the wonderful
Yep,
COVID, which is kind of a blessing in disguise. So always a silver lining. There's a
sure.
lot of R&D that came out of it. But both companies were supposed to launch like April 1st, which is COVID hit in Canada, middle of March. That's when everything kind of shut down.
Yeah.
So we were sort of set to commercially launch because we could predict freight costs and sort of product production timelines and costs and everything else.
Yeah.
We had websites ready. Everything was good to go. COVID hit. Everything stopped. Manufacture stopped completely.
Yeah.
And during COVID, a good problem to have, but still a problem, is one of the biggest boom industries was cycling. So people were home and they were isolated and had to, don't talk to other people, don't see other people. Well, they're like, oh, I want to get outside. I want to buy a bike so I can go ride. So bikes sold out, and all bike parts were on back order, backlog for years. So it's a weird stat that we were told, I think in the first year of COVID, so like back in 2020, is, I remember DT Swiss, they predicted that the shortages would be affected, or delivery would be affected until 2024, which is still in the future.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, that can't possibly be right. Like that, there's no way.
Wild.
And I mean, we know where we are right now, and it is. And it's why you don't see a lot of wheels that are now built up with DT Swiss. They used to own the industry. Like they used to be the hub on every high-end wheel. And that's what happened. So unfortunately, like the way the cycling industry works and the timing of COVID is all of the OEM companies and the bike shops do their bookings for the following calendar year in usually October for delivery in February to April.
Yeah.
And that's the timing, so the delivery timing. So they had all the bookings, and COVID hit Asia first, which is where a lot of this is manufactured. So no capacity to deliver on previous year's orders. Plus now all of the current stuff that were in bike shops in North America and probably worldwide were sold out because everybody started buying bikes. And their bikes then needed repairs, which caused further shortages of everything else. And now here we are, 3 years later, and things are definitely getting back on track.
Sure.
But it's a slow recovery. So that was, I've lost track of what your original question was. So that was
No, so that was a good question. Why you're still doing that? It sounds like there's still demand for your services.
Yeah, so there we go. So because of the stall in that, we were supposed to launch, and I knew that there was going to be a long lag, and so I had to continue working. So 2 reasons for it is, one, because I needed income.
Yep.
And I'm self-employed, and I've had an R&D business that has, I've just kind of lived trying to make it work, believing that it would work and believing that we're getting ready to launch, to then having to sort of find a way to make some money to live. So the repair business was the one thing during COVID where now all bike shops were getting cracked frames in, because customers would come in and say, it's cracked, what do I do? They can't get a new one. There's no option to replace it.
Yeah.
So repair was the big thing. And I think I've never done so many repairs in my life. And I've to the point where I'd go to bed at night and I'd wake up because my hands were so swollen and painful. And it's such hard work.
Yeah.
But I did too many hours a day of just all bike frames and wheels and anything carbon, just repairing and painting. So that was for money, just so I could kind of get by and keep doing the Elevo and the SÖR development. And That has, through COVID, still continued. And again, I'll go back, like I said, it was kind of the silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
It's forced us to kind of pre-launch, develop.
Yeah.
So I know you asked me this before, and you said, don't answer the questions. You sent me a text message and said, are they two or the same company? No, so they're two different ones. So Elevo is carbon fiber high performance race wheels. So what we're trying to do is create the best performing race wheel possible. It was intended to, or it was developed for, in particular, the Brazil and that race market. So my partner for that is so Brian, he's Brazilian, and he dealt particularly in importing into Brazil. So it was in the garment industry. So that was his background, but he knows all of the importing laws and the ins and the outs and what's allowed. So Brazil has some of the most strict importing laws and highest taxes worldwide. And because of that reason, they have like no winter. There's a huge triathlon, road biking, and mountain biking population that goes 12 months of the year, and no mainstream bike or wheel brand exports to Brazil
yet.
Yeah. So, and that's because of the importing laws that the Brazil government imposes. So he saw an opportunity. So Brian saw an opportunity there. He was getting into triathlon and racing, and he didn't know anything about the product. So he knew I did, and I was coaching. I started out coaching at the time, so he was doing some triathlon.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, he goes, there's a really good opportunity here. We should do this. And I always just thought, I'm like, well, I don't think you realize how hard, like, you really need to want to get into a business to do it. I'm like, that's why so many businesses fail. I'm like, it is 10, 20 times harder and more involved than you ever expected in your wildest dreams. Mm-hmm. That's why people give up. But yeah, he's like one of those people in life that absolutely shocked me in the best way. Like, he's probably one of the hardest working people I've ever come across in life. Wow. I still don't know how he does it, but I was like, okay, sure, let's do it. And I will design the product. And if you'll do if you want to do this. Yeah. And he's absolutely like, outshone me and done all the work. And so I had an incredible partner there. And what we did with that company is it was developed, we tested, so round by round, design the product, get it delivered, several different test wheels of different depths. I'd test them, he'd test them. So I feel like I've lived on a bike for most of my life. Yeah. So I know bike, I know wheels, I know feel and experience and all this. So I test them. I know my opinion. He'd test them. So he would be more of an age group athlete. So his experience, feedback, and then we'd send it to pro athletes. So we sponsor a whole lot of pro athletes, and then they would ride the wheels for however long. And we'd tell them, go break them, go beat them up, torture test them. Let us know what you think. Let us know how they can be made better. Let us know the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. Mm-hmm. And we went through round by round, like several per year, which was our advantage because we hadn't launched. When you launch, you have to create a product. Yeah. You have to create, a SKU number, and this is our offering for the year. Here's our catalog. And then you have to start producing it and sell it. Yeah. So your R&D stops. So during COVID, we were able to use all the pro athletes and go through several rounds, which would probably only happen with other companies, maybe one per year, like one round of development and testing and all of that. So we went through several. We just kept going and kept going. And we have some wheels that have an incredible amount of miles and are still like that pro cyclists are riding, and they're awesome. Can't be, and they're more safe. We had a lot of athletes that gave up their wheels that were some of the best in the industry. So other name brands and they said, no, I want to ride this wheel because I race better on it. It's better performing. So that feedback was good. But we have a whole handful of athletes that have helped us through our development, and we've gone through years right now. Hopefully we're going to launch this year. But we've gone through years of several times a year improving the product, improving it, getting feedback, and then redeveloping. So it's gotten the product, I think, to the best place we can get it right now.
And it's launching when, sorry?
To be determined, but hopefully for this race season.
Okay, so 2024.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy them right now, but it's sort of like you'd have to sort of message us and order them, and so that it wouldn't be not commercially launched or OEM sales, things like that. So hopefully this spring. And then the second one is SÖR. So SÖR is the company. So SÖR was named and branded once I partnered with Phil Light, so who was with Cervelo.
Mm-hmm.
And SÖR was an idea that I had back when I was racing. So always while I was racing, I was always told, you can't ride a disc. Don't ride a disc. Don't ride deep dish. Don't ride. There was always this limitation between aero and safety and weight and performance. So everything depended on, to get your best performance.
Yeah.
Never meant that you were riding the quote unquote fastest wheel that tested fastest in the wind tunnel. That was the most aerodynamic, the one that could save you X number of minutes in a 40K time trial. That never equated to that number of claimed minutes to any athlete. The ones that it worked for were like the pro team tour. So Tour de France guys, they have the power, they have the technical skills, and also the weights. They're mostly men. So it's also body weight is a big thing. So if you have a strong crosswind gust, that is a highly unstabilized force, and that creates the problem where the rider is now putting all their energy and effort into restabilizing or centering the bike or not blowing off the road, so staying on the road rather than off, but they're no longer racing. So the energy they put out is no longer being translated into forward motion. You're still riding, but you're trying to.
Your survival. It's survival.
Yeah, it's survival. There's some races that I've done where I had just thought I just don't want to end up in a ditch because I just kept being blown that way.
Yeah.
And as you get more aero, you get deeper section profile rims as well as bike frames. And that's just a bigger sort of wind sail for the wind to hit when it comes at you from the side. And it's just going to throw you straight to the side. So it hits a hard, immovable or non-flexible surface.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole object, which is bike plus rider, is going to move in the direction of the force of the wind. So it's, so that's just the one component is stability. So when you have crosswinds, it's scary, it's unstable, it's not necessarily fast for all riders. The other thing is if it's a hilly course, or even if it's a flat course, it's the weight. So the more aero the rim or the bike gets, the heavier it becomes. So
there's a trade-off.
The rims become, it's deeper section. So, and wheels, as you know, it's rotational force. So those are the things that you have to continually reaccelerate every time you turn a corner or go around a pylon, or stop or hit a hill. You have to carry it up a hill, but you also have to reaccelerate it through corners.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough because that takes the phrase is you only have so many matches to burn in a race.
Yeah.
Every time you have to do that, it takes a little bit out of you, and that's going to affect your run, if not your bike and your run. So I always thought, why would you produce something that is, quote unquote, the fastest wheel, the fastest frame, but you would warn some riders to not use it? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Why would you not try to solve the problem of making it as light as possible, as stable as possible, and as aero as possible. And like, there's got to be a way to do that. So that was my sort of
idea.
Yeah, I'm like, there has to be, like, there's a problem. There's only not a solution because nobody tried to solve all three. And I did, because I guess it bothered me enough. Like, it did. I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know why. Why would you warn me if this is faster? Why shouldn't I race it on it? And I mean, I knew why I shouldn't have, but so I started developing and sort of tinkering with my own equipment. But what is the SÖR wheel? So that is a wheel that is as light as possible. So it is the lightest disc wheel.
Yeah.
So it's disc wheel and deep dish. So it's the lightest disc wheel and the lightest deep dish. It is the most stable, and it is the fastest. So Phil and I have gone into the wind tunnel a bunch of times during COVID, too many times, because I've had to build all the test wheels.
Yeah.
And so we've sort of perfected what we think is the ideal sidewall flexibility and material. There are a few options now that we use, but the idea is you create a wheel where the job of the sidewall is to absorb and dissipate any crosswind forces.
Yeah.
Second to that is by allowing that, so it morphs. So it morphs and is reactive to the wind. And by doing that reactive morphing, it also throws force in a different direction. So it creates lift. So just like airfoils do, or wing sails on like America's Cup boats that like fly. So what I'm trying to do is create forward thrust through crosswinds. So forward thrust is something that is also a stabilizing motion. Anything going forward pulls you into stability. Anything coming from the side and hitting something that is non-moving or non-adaptive is going to throw you off. So you're going to be thrown sort of to the direction that the wind is pushing you.
Yeah.
So the second thing is, if the job of the sidewalls is to be adaptive, morphing, and flexible, you can also design them to be a material that is super lightweight.
Yeah.
So flexible materials are by nature lightweight. So right now, disc wheels are carbon fiber on the side. So that's lightweight, but not super lightweight. Film is lightweight. Anything that is not a solid mass is lightweight. So it allows us to drop the weight. And then tertiary to that is you can now design the interior of the wheel to be as light as possible and have the highest strength as possible. So you want it to be super stiff and super light. So now the interior design of the wheel can be anything you want. It doesn't have to be aero spokes. It doesn't have to be like what is traditional, because you know that you're going to cover it in something that's adaptive and super lightweight. So now it allows you to build the rim to then accommodate all of these things. Your rim can be super shallow, and then the end product is just like light as can be. So right now we have a disc wheel. I built up a few, I think about 670 gram disc wheel that I built this year. So one that
let me interrupt really quick. Sorry.
Yeah.
What 690 grams? Compare that to, like, let's just say the head jet disc right now, or another
so
one.
Yeah. So 670 on the scale compared to the head jet. So most of them right now are about 1100.
Okay.
So the Zip came out with like what they called like the sub, or the 999 or whatever, sub 1,000. So that went under, so under 1,000 grams, but that's a flat disc, so it doesn't deal well with crosswinds, and it's more unstable in crosswinds. So the ones that do better in crosswinds are heavier. So you're going to add 100 to 200 grams to that. They deal better with crosswinds, and they create a little bit of thrust. So when you have your yaw angles become larger, so they come at you from the side more. they can like head, for example, like I think it's a vanquish disc, like that one can produce watts of thrust at, whatever yaw angles as it starts to become steep, but it has a pretty severe stall point. So at some point, it then drastically goes to highly unstable.
Yeah.
So ours, because we designed it to continue to flex, like if you think of like a flag flapping in the wind, a flag will continually hold the wind as it moves, because it moves so that the wind moves it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the design of this is the wind actually causes the sidewall to move so that it maintains contact, and you have flow and attachments of airflow, which keeps the air from going turbulent. So it makes it far more aerodynamic. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is it creates a forward thrust in an advantageous direction. So when you have a crosswind, it creates thrust forward. So that's just having to do with vectors of wind and apparent wind and then lift, right? So it creates, so I know that this is on video right now, but so if wind hits from this side, so this side, what's going to happen is the whole sidewall is going to do this, which creates an airfoil like this, which creates, so if the wind hits from here, it's always going to go in a forward direction. So no matter where the crosswind's coming from, it'll create thrust.
So let me make sure I understand. Sorry if I may interrupt. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. So for those who aren't watching the video, you have roll, pitch, and yaw, which is like aircraft terms. So roll is like stop, dropping, rolling. Pitch is up and down your nose, and then yaw is literally coming, like from which angle sideways. So I read that you can have up to 90 watts of free power savings with the wind coming at you from a 28-degree yaw. And you were talking about that drop off with a lot of other competition. That drop off kind of happens around 8 to 15 degrees. Like it just becomes more, I guess, turbulent. So I'm curious if I'm going forward, like I'm looking at you, the wind is coming behind me from 28 degrees. I know that that'll create thrust, especially with what you're describing. But if I have I guess it would be whatever's not 28, but over here, however many degrees around that is, if it's coming at you, you're saying it does the same thing?
Yeah, so here, I know this won't help any of your listeners, but if this is...
wheel, so it's fine.
I'm just going to draw you a diagram. So here is front wheel, back wheel, handlebars.
Yeah.
So let's say your wind is coming from, so you wanted like a slight forward angle, right? So let's say this is your apparent wind angle, right? So apparent wind is the sum of the two vectors. So you're going forward, plus there's natural, so true wind speed, so the wind in nature. So that your apparent wind is this. You're always going to get lift at a 90-degree angle from that. So lift, no matter what, is always going to be here.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So what I'm going to do right now, so there's your apparent wind. Here is your 90-degree vector, and so that's your 90 degree shown here. So it's always going to be in a forward motion. So the best stability and thrust producing is here. Yeah, no, here. So when it comes to the side, it goes straight up here. So when it comes from here, it's still going to be forward. So no matter what, it'll always be forward. And so which is why it's adapted. I mean, that's why like America's Cup boats, those are sailboats. So where they have hulls, and hulls sit in the water, which will have a friction force, right? So that should be something that slows them down. So those boats travel like, 90 kilometers an hour and 30 kilometer an hour winds. So it doesn't necessarily, and this is what always like kind of perplexes me, is how does something that also has a friction force associated with its forward momentum go 3 times faster than the only external force that's propelling it? Yeah. So something else is happening there, and it's physics, like, but that's what happens, and that's how boats and planes are designed. That's how planes fly is lift forces.
What I find sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say what I find so fascinating is like when I took physics in college, I thought going into physics class, this is like physics 1. I was like, oh, I understand. It's all intuitive. But then once you start to really get into the nitty gritty, there's a lot of things, especially with aerodynamics or hydrodynamics, that's just not intuitive the way that my brain works. And the only reason I honestly believe you is because like what you're telling me, I need to like go and study that some more because that just does not make sense in my mind. But I have noticed, because I ride I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 11 hours a week. And whenever you get certain headwinds, I will notice that I'm actually going a little bit faster with less effort than with no wind from like you're talking about that degree. So it confirms what I've felt, which make no sense. But I don't know. I guess what I'm asking is, when can I have one of these wheels?
Yeah, you can definitely shot. There's a video. So this is one of the videos I showed Phil, and like I had it took me so long to find anyone in the industry that actually believed me. Yes. For years, people would be like,
Phil.
I know, like, he thought me crazy. But for years, like, I raced, and I knew all the people in the industry, and anytime I would say, why don't you do this, or what about this, I get a range of responses from either them kind of laughing at me saying that, okay, that's a cute idea, or them saying that's impossible. Like, it's the same surface area of the wheel and it's the same wind force. You can't have a different result. And I'm like, the one thing I thought of is, which is also a weird connection. I don't even know how I thought of it, but those old firefighter catcher nets, like the ones that you see in the old black and white movies, where if there's a person in the balcony way up and the apartment's on fire, they jump into what looks like a trampoline that is held by all the firefighters. So I look at that and I say, look, same person dropping from the same place, they land and they hit the firefighter, the catcher net, they survive, they land, they hit the floor, they don't. Like, it's pretty simple. It's like there's a different result, even though all of the other components are exactly the same.
Yeah.
And having a sidewall that's adaptive is what allows for the end result to be beneficial. Well, you can design it so that it is beneficial anyways. And again, like you go back to America's Cup boats, is how does something that should go slower than the winds because it's only propelled by the wind and it has friction forces, how does it go multiple times faster than the speed of the wind that's propelling it?
Yeah.
So that's what drove me. And on the website, so on SOAR, on the SOAR website, there is a video somewhere of, this is what I showed Phil when he first came to see my prototypes.
Yeah.
And because I was like, why don't they see it? Why can't they see what I see?
Yeah.
And, some people didn't see to believe. But so what I did is I made a little, it's like a skateboard.
Yeah.
So
I'll link the video. I've seen the video. Yeah.
Yeah. So perfect. So, and the only thing I changed, same surface area, the same exact model. One is rigid, one is morphable. Put them in front of multiple fans, straight on crosswinds. One does not move forward at all. So that's when it's rigid. So it's only a destabilizing force that wants to push it directly over. And the other one, the one that's morphable, every single time, put it on the table, and it just actually gains speed as it goes across.
Yeah.
So
wild.
Yeah.
So I have a couple more questions, and then I'll try to wrap it up because you probably have to go do things, so I don't want to keep you too long. But for SOAR now, is that launched already? Is it officially launched?
Yeah, so SOAR is launched. We're trying to get, right now we're designing and trying to get into manufacturing rims, so carbon fiber. We tried aluminum last year. There were a lot of issues with that because you start it with an extrusion. So it's an extrusion shape, so which will be a cross-section profile of a rim. And then after the extrusion process, you then roll it into
the shape.
So like a 700C or depending on what the rim diameter was. So when you roll it, because it's aluminum and metal is malleable, as you roll it, things change shape slightly, which is fine for the most part in rims. But because our intent with the SÖR wheel is to make it a regular, super lightweight training wheel where you have a snap-in sidewall. So the sidewalls can be put on, taken off, no tools required, and they can be replaced. So if something happens, it's just like, you get a flat.
Yeah, it's modular.
Yeah. So you ride and you get a flat tire. So you put in a new tube, you're back up and going. So same thing. It's much faster. It's no tools required. A quick replacement. So just snap it out, snap the new one in, off you go. That's the intent. And also for travel, you can remove the sidewalls so that you don't have to worry about damage. And now you can train on them and race on them. And eventually you can do things like change the flexibility of sidewalls. So eventually there might be different tensions of sidewall for different results, depending on, I guess it also has to fit within a rear triangle.
Yeah.
So right now we're trying to launch for this, so with a product for this spring, summer, whenever, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the hope, and that's kind of what we're working towards right now. The end goal, and this is why, we've been, so Phil and I have been filing patents as we go all the way along. So I don't want to necessarily be a wheel manufacturer or a wheel company, and I don't want to compete against the other wheel companies. I am actually, and this is what inspired me in the first place, is I think wheels should look different. Bikes should look different. Same thing. So bikes should also be morphing. But so the end goal for me is I would like to see bikes and wheels, the design and what they look like, change so that they can, the industry shift. And I don't need it to be me. I don't need it to be SÖR, because I would love for us to then go and do the next innovation that can also do the same thing and change cycling and make riders faster in a different way. So I would love it if we launch this. I know we have to prove it in the industry, so other companies won't want to adopt it because they've already done their own R&D and produced their next year of products.
Yeah.
But so we're gonna have to prove it. But in the end, what I would love is if all wheels look like this, they're just designed, they're morph, they're adaptive, they're lighter, they're safer. That's the biggest thing, is they're safe. And any rider, because it's light, it's safe, it's stable, and it's fast, any rider on any course in any wind condition can ride the wheel to their best results. So now the riders themselves, who've trained so hard, can start to see their best performances and their potential, which is at the end of the day, that's your kind of Christmas morning of unwrapping your presents. But that's all the hard work you put in. You want to see it. You want to see what you're capable of. And you don't want the limitation to be the equipment and what equipment does or doesn't apply to you particularly as a rider. Yeah.
That's super fascinating. Well, I'm excited for you guys to launch and shift the industry. I mean, I saw that it's patented. So I'm assuming Phil probably pushed for that.
No, I started that before. So Phil and I, it's not been easy. It's a lot of writing, and it's a lot of that's been tough, but Phil's been massive supporter in that, and it's been awesome, and I'm glad we did it, even though it's a lot to put in up front. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of money, and it's but now we're at the point where that part is all sort of done, and now we're trying to launch. So if we have to prove it, then great. And the connection between, so you asked this, is between Elevo and SÖR, is with Elevo, we've used all the pro athletes to get their feedback to produce the best possible wheel. To get as light, as fast, as functional as possible when it comes to sort of what I would call a traditional or standard carbon fiber race wheel. And we've been able to use, so I've been able to use those athletes. And Tamara rides, Jason West, there's been a lot of athletes that have, I owe so much to them, because right now, I'm making still every single pro race wheel I'm here in my kitchen.
Start a YouTube, Nicole. I don't know why you haven't started a YouTube to document this process, because people would go nuts over it.
So I can't wait for the day where I don't have to make the wheels, and they actually just come off of
a manufacturing line.
A manufacturing line, and you can buy the parts in the bike shop, and riders can go and get them. Because right now it's so hard, and it's why we haven't launched, because I'm building them all. But a lot of so much thanks and gratitude goes to the racers, because they're hand built, they're one-offs that are not Tamara last year, for example. But also Tamara, for example, last year flew to Indian Wells, and it looks like she got almost like a forklift or something to the side of her bike bag. She was soft-sided bag, but it impacted and smashed so the wheel showed up shattered. And days before the race. So then I'm like, okay, and I have to. She can't go to a bike shop and buy a new sidewall. She can't travel with a new sidewall. I'm like, that's the end goal. So until that point, I'm like, because I race pro and I know what's on the line is. She races with this wheel and travels with this wheel, knowing that there is a very real risk of it being damaged in airline travel, because you're putting your face in the baggage people. And, if that happens, there's a lot of money on the line now. So,
Well, tell Tamara to start traveling private, and then that'll solve the problem.
Just get our own private jet.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a couple of more questions, if it's okay. Do you still have time for a couple more?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so first question. I know from my personal experience and then hearing others people's experience with starting companies, you get a lot of no's, and I can only imagine how many no's you got before you were introduced or had that opportunity, that shot, that elevator pitch to Phil to kind of bring him on, because I imagine not only who he is, but the connections he holds enables something like this to become reality. How did that affect you with all of the no's? Did it affect you? Did you just I got to keep trying? Did you almost quit a few hundred times or none?
No, I never almost quit. I guess I had a serious conversation with myself when I started it. And it's also the way I'm driven has nothing to do with an end result ever. So I would have been happy if I could have just tinkered with my own stuff and made it the fastest in the world, and that would have been awesome. But that's not what I wanted. What I wanted was to see cycling change, and I want to see everybody else who could never ride these wheels, the fastest wheels. I want to see them be able to do that safely, and then go and race, where all their energy goes into just moving forward and having the best race. So, when I was doing it, there was a million no's, and I kind of just every single time I got a no, I never saw it as discouragement. I always thought, okay, they don't see it, so they're not the answer. I also wanted somebody, I would not work with somebody who needed me to prove it to them. So to me, it had to be the right person. And that was really important, because there's no way I would have agreed to work with somebody who thought, okay, maybe that's a good idea. I don't know about this. Maybe let's see if we can develop it. No, that wasn't it. It needed to be somebody who saw exactly what I saw.
Yeah.
And that was a very particular thing I was looking for. Yeah. So when I got a no, that actually to me was kind of easy, because I'm like, no, you're not the person, so you don't see what I see.
Yeah.
So that was a really important requirement in my mind, is I do not need to convince anybody of this. I want to find the person who sees what I see and who wants to change cycling in the way that I sort of has similar mindset and goals, and sees how it can affect racing and cyclists and racers and the industry. So anytime I got a no, I just two questions. Two things is, one is, okay, so they're not the person. Okay. So very quick.
Yeah.
They aren't the person. And the second thing was from my own feedback of, why don't they see it? So I would look at what they said as their feedback to help me try and sort of either improve how I tried to show it or model it, which is how I got in the end to that sort of little skateboard model in the video on the website. Because I know some people believe and don't necessarily need to see. Like they just believe things, not blindly, but because they see it in their head and they actually know it. And then other people need to see something to believe it. So like, yeah, two different types of people. It didn't matter to me, but the thing is, I wanted to find the person that saw what I saw, had the same goals as I had, and whether I needed a model that actually very bluntly proved it, because I didn't have capacity to go into a wind tunnel. Like
it's
financially
great.
out of my reach. So Phil saw my little skateboard model you saw, and I had also showed him, like, I had a bike frame. I had so many wheels. I had gone through so many renditions, and I'd already filed some provisional patents, and so that was. So I think he was, first of all, impressed or thought I was crazy. Because who would go through?
It takes
that
a little bit
much?
of both, I think, to be an entrepreneur and come out with a new
Yeah.
product and be an inventor.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he saw it, and then once we started working together, and this is another added sort of silver lining to COVID, is we're in COVID, we're not producing, we can't launch, so let's go to the wind tunnel a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And we went to the wind tunnel, I think 3 or 4 times, and put, 30 wheels in the tunnel.
Wow.
And each one was very particularly different, fun to see what one change would make. And now I had what I had felt as a rider. So I know I had spent 1 million hours on a bike, and I had ridden race wheels, and I had been in every single wind condition possible.
Sure.
And have raced. So I know what equipment feels like, whether it's aero or non-aero. And I had adapted my own equipment, and now there was something that didn't connect. So this is what I loved about it. I had no way to prove it. So this is just my own feeling. So I'd ride, and I had a disc wheel on, and I didn't know that I didn't have my spoked training wheel, like shallow section training wheel on. And we've also done, and there are some other tests and videos on the website where we did wind tests. So we put various different wheels on. I made this strain gauge apparatus which showed a force scale, and we blew wind at it, and then so the wheel would do this. It would flutter in crosswinds like this, and then it would also bounce off the scale, and then we had a camera on the readings. So all of those, especially when you get negative readings, what it meant is it had bottomed out scale, bounced off to the point where there was 0. So that's a bad. Anytime you have negatives, that's bad. But you can see same wind, same fan setup, same wind, same everything, even with a 30 millimeter rim, cross section rim. Race aero tested in the tunnel, idealized. That wheel still unstable in crosswinds, and then you put our full disc on, and it sits there straight, and it doesn't move.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, to me, I'm like, there's
magic.
the one thing. Yeah, it's so you can see it's completely stable in crosswinds. So the job of the sidewall is to absorb and dissipate the crosswind forces and translate them into stabilizing forward thrust or propulsion force, and then it allows the rider to not have to do that. So the rider doesn't have to stabilize; they can just continue racing and putting their energy into their pedals and having it actually translate into forward speed, as their training intended.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm excited for them to launch. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on it, and we'll make sure to link everything for all of these amazing companies that you're working with. I do have one final question for you, and it's a stupid question. So here we go.
I know you've had no stupid questions yet.
I know. I'm trying to live up to the name a little bit. We'll see. But I did ask you your age, and I'm sure my wife's gonna be like, "Why did you do that? You're never supposed to do that to a woman." So we'll see. We'll see how it happens. So the question, with a little bit of a lead up. So X, previously Twitter, is now worth less than half of what Elon Musk paid for it. I don't know if you followed that, but he paid for Twitter last year $44 billion. It's currently valued at $19 billion. I would love to get your professional thoughts and opinion on that.
On its evaluation?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I agree with that. So I agree. Well, my opinion is a company is only as valuable as the mind behind it. So Elon Musk, who is brilliant as can be, has done some very not like he's not stable in his actions, and I think a lot of people have lost trust in some of the things that he's done, said, posted. It's so he, again, going back to a leader in a company is only able, like the evaluation of a company is based on the people and the minds behind it, is you start to question sort of not his sanity, but is he, so he came out with Tesla and even SpaceX, and that is looking absolutely incredible. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is a brilliant mind, and this is somebody who's going to take the world places. And then buys Twitter, and like the one thing that, like, then they get into like petty arguments and small things. And I just remember that one, hearing something about him showing up the first day with a kitchen sink. I don't even know what that is, but it's
PR stunt.
What is that, right? Like that is questionable behavior, and which leads to questioning the leader. And so, yeah, it's the evaluation of company is based on its perceived value, which the value has to do with the people who are supporting it. And when something happens here, like I'm pointing actually to, I'm doing a hand motion, but so with the company or the platform, so which is Twitter or X, that is a little bit off, people start questioning and they stop supporting.
Yeah.
And it doesn't become the same platform and the same experience. Like, go back to Steve Jobs, everything comes down to user experience. It's not the same user experience. So Twitter, for it to maintain its evaluation, would have had to maintain, above all else, the same user experience. And I think that is the one thing that has critically failed. And it's affected the evaluation and also people's trust in what was Twitter.
Yeah. Interesting. I wasn't expecting such a deep response, but it begs me to ask one more final question. If Elon reaches out to you after listening to this podcast, which I'm sure he's listening to, he says, hey, Nicole, I really like your idea for SOAR. I want to invest $50 million into SOAR. What would you say?
I'd say, no problem. You invest, and you have to trust Phil and I as the people to run the company, because you're investing in the same thing, right? So absolutely. And love his input, love to have his mind and his resources. But you always have to stick with what, you got to dance with the one that brung you.
Yeah.
You have to stick with what originally drove you to start something, your original vision, and who it was directed or aimed towards. And as soon as that wavers, that's where you start to kind of become a little bit like fuzzy in your company's direction. And that's where people become fuzzy in their support. And sure, Elon Musk, come support us.
I'll send it. We'll tag him on X after the episode.
There you go. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much. I'll talk to you for just a second off the air, but just want to say thank you so much for jumping on and spending 2 hours with me and just telling me about your story. I love the technical stuff side of this, so I'll probably reach out again at a later date and just have like a super geeked out conversation where I could learn hopefully from you. So it'd be super fun.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by The Rudy Project. Thank you so much to Mike Bunting and the team at The Rudy Project for sponsoring today's episode. If you want to receive 35% off everything that is Rudy Project, from helmets to sunglasses to gear, please check out the show description notes, and you will find a link where you can set up an ambassador account to get, that's right, 35% off everything. Also, we have a newsletter that is on the website, stupidquestions.show. If you sign up for that newsletter and give us a follow on Instagram, it's just the Stupid Questions Podcast. Anyway, I'll link it in the notes. If you follow us and sign up for the newsletter, you will be entered for a drawing that we will be doing for some Rudy Project gear. There are shirts, there are hats, there is water bottles, there are sunglasses, a number of different things. So if you want to be entered into that drawing, again, please go follow us on Instagram and sign up for the newsletter at stupidquestions.show. That is the website. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Stupid Questions with Nicole. I just want to extend another huge shout out for Nicole for spending so much of her time with me to tell her story and just share what she's got going on. I'm definitely going to have her back on so we can have a more in-depth conversation about everything else that she does, because one thing we didn't even touch on is the fact that she's a coach, and off the air we were talking about how that has inspired her and taught her so much about herself as well. As the lives that she's been able to inspire. If you made it to this point in the podcast, just want to say thank you so much. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of those other podcast platforms, please drop us a review and make sure to rate the podcast. It would be super helpful to us as we grow. If you're watching on YouTube or Instagram or anything like that, please like, comment, subscribe, /follow. And if you want to be entered into our newsletter, go to the stupidquestions.show website where you can sign up for exclusives, hopefully starting a newsletter soon and some other things, as well as giveaways. So if you want to do that, please do it. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next one.